If you put your egg white proteins under the microscope and you compared them to that from a live chicken egg, or from a live chicken that had an egg, would it look exactly the same?
Yeah, so this is actually the one of the beauties of fermentation, which I love. So the egg white has, and the egg has hundreds of proteins, and they all do different things. And so when you eat an egg,
Mm-hmm.
you eat all the proteins at the same time, even some proteins that are actually not good for you. So, for example, avidin is a protein in the egg white that actually binds to biotin if you don't denature it, i.e., cook it. And so sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it can create a biotin deficiency in the body, and that's why certain animals can't consume it because it actually is not good for them. And so we can remove those proteins that are either like anti-nutrients, that actually are not totally beneficial, because as safe as these proteins are, because we know that they're safe broadly, but um, the challenge with these proteins is they weren't made for us. Like the chicken egg, right? The proteins in the egg were meant to support the life of a baby, of a chicken embryo,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to feed that. And so they just so happen to be also available to humans, and we can process them well, but they weren't necessarily intended for us. And so part of our job is, really deciphering which proteins are awesome and which ones maybe are not so awesome. And so we can actually pick and choose the different proteins, and isolate them, and use them as individual products. So all to say that the proteins, to answer your question directly, the proteins we produce are identical. So under microscope, they will
Mm-hmm.
have the same amino acid profile. They will be processed in the same way as traditional egg white proteins. But it depends. But the combination of them is not what we specialize in. We can combine them in different ways, and that's part of for applications for cakes. You don't necessarily want you want a protein that can foam really well, and so we can actually dial up some of the foaming properties to create
Mm-hmm.
lighter and fluffier kinds of cakes. And then for athletes, we can make scrambles that have actually a better amino acid profile than those of than a traditional chicken egg, actually. And so that's how we
Mm-hmm.
can actually leverage the technology to create foods that are not just as good as what the animal makes, but how do we actually create food that is designed for the end user?
How far can this technology go with eggs? As I understand it, I think you have a product out already that is egg whites. But do you have plans? And you mentioned scramble there, but do you have plans to work towards recreating an entire egg? I'm sure people are thinking that right now. Is that possible
Yeah.
to recreate that sort of entire experience, or do you see the consumer's kind of understanding and expectations of what an egg looks like changing?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, our ambition is, and our plans are, to replace the egg in all its forms, to create a animal-free, sustainable option for anyone who consumes eggs in whatever application. At the end of the day, for us, the number one thing is impact, and the way to drive impact is by meeting people where they're at. So not, we have other products like the Every protein that is actually an egg white protein that is found in the egg white, but actually has no eggy smell and no eggy taste. And so it's a very, very clean protein that you don't have to add any sugar or artificial sweeteners or chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry to consume a high protein drink, a high protein, your coffee in the mornings. How do you add protein to your diet in a way um, that doesn't come with all the other baggage and crap that's added to it? So there are
Mm.
some products where we're actually going well beyond what animals can do and what our existing food system can provide. But for the most part, on the egg side, our focus is meeting people where they're at and creating the same form factors, and then also eventually also kind of optimize and innovate and create new form factors. And I think ultimately for us, the focus is let's drive impact as much as possible. And what that means is firing across all cylinders, because the beauty of this technology is that it's very scalable. Like I mentioned with brewing and the way that brewers use yeast to convert sugar into alcohol, we actually can use very similar infrastructure. And so our factories at scale are like just big protein breweries. But instead of making beer, they're making protein. And, we have AB InBev as a partner, and they're the world's largest fermentation company that has a massive global footprint. And so we want to make protein, high quality protein, as available and accessible as Bud Light.